미국은 크레딧으로 움직입니다. 크레딧 스코어는 개인이 청구서를 지불할 능력을 나타내며 미국인의 재정생활 중 거의 모든 면에 영향을 미칩니다.
It's like your passport into everything that you need to do as an adult.
And it affects so many things, not just access to credit. So your ability to get a credit card, a mortgage, a reasonable car loan. Landlords use credit reports and credit scores. So it'll affect your ability to get an apartment. Insurance companies use
신용
them.
점수가 낮거나 없으면 재정적으로 심각한 결과를 초래할 수 있습니다. 미국인의 42%는 본인 신용 점수 때문에 신용카드나 대출과 같은 금융상품을 구입할 수
Life can
없습니다.
become more expensive and more difficult as your credit score falls.
그러나 일부 전문가들은 현재의 신용보고 및 평가 시스템에 중대한 문제가 있다고
The
비판합니다.
current credit scoring system, as it stands, is flawed.
And this error of being fundamentally misaligned has huge ramifications across the system for millions of Americans.
이러한 비판 중 많은 부분이 잘못됐다고 말하는 사람도 있습니다.
The reality is that the credit reporting system that we have here in the United States is sort of like the crown jewel of the world.
A lot of the criticisms are based on some fundamental misunderstanding of how credit scores are calculated and how they're used.
그렇다면 미국에서 신용점수는 어떻게 작동할까요? 이것은 소비자에게 도움이 될까요? 아니면 해가 될까요? 신용점수는 일반적으로 개인의 재정 안정성과 신용도를 나타내는 300에서 850 사이의 숫자입니다. 소비자는 숫자가 높을수록 대출을 더 잘 받습니다.
Credit scores in the 500s are considered to be very bad. Credit scores in the 600s, we're starting to use terms like subprime, near prime, getting close to average, but you really need to get yourself into the 700s before you actually hit the national average, which is between 710 and 720, and then start working your way into the elite level scores, which are well into the 700s and certainly into the 800s.
신용 점수와 보고서는 별개의 것입니다. 보고서는 신용 상태에 대한 정보가 포함된 명세서이며 신용 점수는 보고서의 정보를 기반으로 계산됩니다.
The credit report is like the test you took. The credit score is the grade you got on the test. One is influential over the other, but they're not the same thing.
Fair Isaac Corporation 또는 FIFCO에서 계산하는 신용 점수는 오늘날 상위 대출 기관의 90%가 사용하는 업계 표준이 되었습니다. 이 금액은 다음의 5가지 범주를 고려하여 계산됩니다. 1. 35%의 집을 내요. 2. 30%의 미지급 금액. 3. 15%의 신용기록 기간. 4. 10%의 새로운 신용. 5. 보유하고 있는 신용 유형입니다.
It's based on an analytic algorithm, so we look at actual data patterns to say what helps us predict whether you're going to pay credit in the future.
신용 점수의 주요 이점 중 하나는 빠르고 건전한 측정 방법을 제공한다는 것입니다. 미국인들은 오늘날 가계부채가 2022년 2, 4분기 동안 16조 달러인 만큼 그 어느 때보다 많은 돈을 빌리고 있고 이런 현상은 신용점수와 비즈니스에 악영향을 미치고 있습니다.
It allows lenders to make very, very precise decisions and have a very deep understanding of the likelihood of someone paying you back.
전문가들은 이러한 간결한 절차가 미국인들이 오랫동안 저금리를 누릴 수 있었던 이유라고 말합니다.
The credit scoring system allows industry to quickly and cheaply make decisions about whether or not you're going to have credit. The cheaper it is for the lender to decide whether or not they're going to give you credit, in the aggregate, the lower the cost is for the lender, and hopefully that gets passed along to the consumers in a more efficient system.
Without this system, lenders are going to do what lenders do, which is they're going to mitigate their risk. What that means in practical terms is higher interest rates, because that's how lenders mitigate risk. They charge everybody more to subsidize the risk that's posed by everyone, or more declinations. It's easier to say no to an applicant than to book an applicant who you know is going to default on a loan.
숫자를 사용하여 개인의 신용도를 나타내는 것은 대출 차별을 방지하는 데 도움이 되었다고 합니다. 대출 기관은 신용 점수가 발명되기 전에는 주관적인 평가 방법에 상당히 의존했었습니다.
When it was first developed was an advancement. It is better than having some bankers sit across from you and judge you and read the information in your credit score because they bring a lot of their subjective analysis and their own life experience into the analysis. And if their life is different than your life, frankly, if it's some white guy sitting across from some woman of color, that analysis can be flawed.
If the information is not on a credit report, it is systemically impossible for your credit score to be influenced by it. What is not on your credit report? Things like your gender, your sexual orientation, your politics, your level of education, how much money you make, the socioeconomic makeup of your neighborhood, your level of education.
So we're able to assess credit risk looking only at the past behavior that is on the credit report and only to the extent that it predicts future credit risk.
그러나 여러 좋은 점들이 있음에도 불구하고 현 신용평가 시스템에 여전히 차별이 존재합니다. 미국 성인 5,000명을 대상으로 한 설문조사에 따르면 흑인의 절반 이상, 히스패닉의 41%, 백인의 37%, 아시아계의 18%가 신용 점수가 낮거나 없다고 합니다.
Credit scores are based on past performance. So you're going backwards in history to make a judgment about the future. The further we go backwards in history, the deeper the structural racism in the United States was.
Intentional racism that happened decades ago gets baked into the cake, into the system, into the institutions and policies of our society. And that kind of structural racism requires no animus, no intent, but it still hurts Black and brown consumers.
If your parent put your name on a bill because they had bad credit and then they were delinquent, you can turn 18 and inherit derogatory information on your credit report through nothing that you did. If you're a new immigrant in this country, your prior credit history doesn't travel with you. These credit bureaus are mostly domestic, so you show up with nothing. And by the way, a blank slate is a bad place to be in credit scoring. It means that you're unscored and your information starts off low and poor.
미국 성인의 19%는 신용 기록이 전혀 없거나 기존 시스템으로는 채점할 수 없는 것으로 나타납니다.
Sadly, what the scores do is they sort of amplify those inequalities because they go in and they say, okay, you're already disadvantaged. Now you can be doubly disadvantaged because the score then sort of objectifies that you are somehow not worthy of being given a chance, that you are somehow deserving of much higher fines and fees than everyone else.
신용보고서의 오류는 종종 잘못된 점수로 이어집니다. 2021년에 한 설문조사에 따르면 3분의 1 이상이 본인 신용보고서의 오류를 발견했습니다. 2021년도에 접수된 70만 건 이상의 소비자 불만 보고 중 절반 이상이 신용보고서의 오류와
For
관련이
me, it was a
있었습니다.
different person named Aaron Klein who didn't pay their cell phone bill in New Jersey. I also happened to live in New Jersey for graduate school, and this stuck with me for years.
1 in 20 have an error so serious it could cost them either the ability to get credit or a job or an apartment.
그러나 업계에 계신 분들은 이와는 다른 주장을 펼치고 있습니다.
When we look at our data, it is astronomically reliable. So we're constantly auditing and evaluating our data. Our regulators are examining us on a regular, ongoing basis. So they're looking at all of our systems around data integrity, data reliability, how we engage with consumers, etc.
신용조사기관은 공정신용보고법에 근거하여 부정확한 정보를 수정할 책임이 있습니다. 그러나 연구에 따르면 많은 소비자들은 이러한 오류를 수정하기 어렵다고
Credit bureaus are
말합니다.
like a judge that always rules for the defendant. So if your mortgage servicer says you're late, even though you really were never late and you have documentation that you were never late, it will still show up as late.
Fixing mistakes is expensive and time-consuming for the credit reporting and credit scoring industry. They are not incentivized to have accuracy, particularly if the mistakes are symmetric and even out.
Our entire role in the consumer credit ecosystem is to provide reliable, accurate information. If we were unable to do that, nobody would have any interest in engaging with us whatsoever. Our position is that the system only works and we can only succeed if our data is incredibly reliable and accurate, and that means engaging with consumers continually to try to make sure that they're able to effectively managing their credit and that they're able to effectively feel as though they can interface with us about any concerns that they
또
have.
다른 주요 포인트는 업계 내에서 공정성과 투명성을 보장하는 규제 혹은 감독의 부재입니다.
You know, I think the idea that the industry is unregulated is a fiction, and we operate in one of the most highly regulated spaces possible.
You have a 50-year-old federal statute called the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which essentially mandates everything having to do with credit reports, from our rights to challenge information, our rights to freeze our credit reports, our rights to get copies of our credit reports. You have the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which regulates credit bureaus vis-a-vis credit report accuracy. You have the Federal Trade Commission that shares that regulatory responsibility.
I must say that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which took over oversight of this industry about 10 years ago, they've done a really good job of trying to reform the credit bureaus. But I would go further than more regulation or even more laws.
수년에 걸쳐 신용보고 및 평가기관은 업계의 비판에 대응하여 몇 가지 변경 사항을 적용했습니다. 아마도 이 중 가장 큰 변화는 정확성을 개선하기 위해 대체 데이터를 사용하는 것일 것입니다.
They've started trying to incorporate other quote-unquote non-traditional information. For example, if you pay your mortgage on time every month, your credit score is going to increase. But if you pay your rent on time every month, nothing happens because that information isn't reported.
We've innovated with scores like the FICO Score XD and the Ultra FICO Score. They augment traditional credit data with rich alternative data, such as how you pay your telco utilities, as well as information that's in your checking and savings account. The point of these new scores is to allow consumers to find other ways beside the historical credit to demonstrate their ability to repay credit.
더 많은 규제 변화가 올 수도 있습니다. 신용점수보호법과 종합신용법이라는 두 가지 법안이 모두 2020년도에 하원을 통과했습니다. 이 법안은 소비자 신용을 보호하기 위한 더 많은 감독과 조항으로 신용점수 시스템을 점검하는 것을 목표로 하고 있습니다.
One of the initiatives that we're championing, because we really think the solution to a lot of these concerns around how do you help consumers access financial products is an alternative data piece of legislation called the Credit Access and Inclusion Act, which would really encourage the reporting of rental data, utility data, bring new data into the system that would allow literally millions of Americans to access financial products and services.
그러나 지금의 신용 상태는 궁극적으로 소비자 본인의 재정적 결정에 달려 있습니다.
I'll tell you the two things that you need to do, and it will be impossible for you not to have a good score. Number one, never, ever miss a payment on anything, ever. That's easy. It's writing a check at the end of the month and paying your minimum payment, right? Number two, you got to stay out of credit card debt. And I'm not saying don't use credit cards. I'm saying don't max out your credit cards. Don't use them as a supplement to your income or to keep up with the Joneses or to impress somebody. Pay your bills on time, stay out of excessive credit card debt, lather, rinse, repeat, and you're going to have fantastic credit scores.
You know, how you manage your credit is a sign of responsibility. It's not. A lot of people have negative items on their credit report because they were the victim of bad luck, not because they're bad people. So they got sick, they lost their job, and now they can't pay their bills and their credit report's going to stop them from getting a new one? That's crazy.